the first editing video that I'll do. This will be a separate series where I basically take the images I get out of Midjourney and then I Photoshop them to my liking, to where I would want them to be if I were to post them online or print them out. So let's get into it. We're working with two images that I just created using a prompt I provided a guide for in another video. So check that out if you're curious how I got to this result. We've got two images. One is a kind of more abstract architectural illustration. The other is a nice, more refined, precise illustration. Both of something that's supposed to be Paris, but is really a bit of its own creation. So, first thing I'm going to do is just clean the image up. In terms of content, I'm going to get rid of major glaring issues like this text, which is not actually legible text. If you see a signature, it's not a real person's signature. It's a kind of synthesized, imagined signature, just like the images. When I'm zooming around like that in Photoshop, I'm using the Alt key or the Option key on my keyboard. I'm using a Mac with a mouse. I just hit M on my keyboard. I want to use the marquee rectangular selection tool, and I'm going to select this text, right click on it, and you can't see it on my screen, but delete and fill selection is one of the options there. That's like a kind of quick way to fill in a flat color when you texture or gradient or other detail. I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm going to kind of be careful not to get too close to actual parts of the image I want to keep. As you can see here, we got a bit of a creative interpretation. It's copying textures from other parts of the image, so this is just kind of a fast way. You can totally use the stamp tool or the clone tool as well. That's often faster if it's the right thing. What this tool is, it lets you grab part of the image. So I'm going to take part of the image over here, and then I'm going to clone it here, just like a brush. As you can see, there are parts that I actually don't want, so I might shrink down to a smaller size. These are the brush controls, so the size of your brush and how soft or hard the edge of it is. And as you can see, when you use hard, there's some actual variation in the pixels here, and having two different colors, even if there's only slightly different meat at a harsh line, is pretty visible. Subtle things are visible with this stuff. So using a soft brush can help. You can press Alt and then click where you want to copy from, and then you can draw where you want to copy to. I want somewhere in the middle here. Whoops. Okay, and then I'm just going to kind of use this brush around to touch up other miscellaneous noise or visual artifacts that I don't know if are really helping to make the image feel cleaner without losing anything important. This area here is looking a little rough. Something about the way I copied isn't the best here. You have to kind of find the right part of the image. That's a more similar color to that area to get it close enough. And then sometimes I'll go back to this other tool if I think it might have a better chance. It's, I think, good enough there, partly because this image is naturally a little bit sketchy. So I'm going to go back to the stamp tool and keep cleaning up. Might get rid of more of that. Okay, and then there's some kind of areas here that I'm not loving. They might be a little bit harder than it's worth dealing with. or they might just take longer to, you can always kind of get it in the end. It's a matter of time. They might be more trouble than they're worth, but sometimes the fix is easy, and at a glance you don't really notice something that might seem more obvious that it's an edit close up. At a glance, it doesn't look like an edit necessarily. But you can see I'm basically just copying parts of the image and using them creatively to make bad things go away. This is another example of this. You'll probably see this tool not work very well. Delete and fill selection. Here's the visual. It kind of copies in a blurry way, or it copies the wrong things. So in this case, we can use generative fill, which you don't really need to describe anything if you just want to get rid of something existing. It works okay. The resolution is poor, but in my case, the volume of images I edit, I find it worth it for small edits like this, where it would be a pain for me to do it manually. So we've selected that area, we've run generative fill on it, and then we've got a few options. We could run it further here to generate more options. But I think for me, that's good enough. No one's really going to notice that detail, and it honestly looks pretty much fine. Zooming in, it's just a little bit. One thing I think that could be improved about it is the texture. It's a little bit airbrushed looking. So just throwing some other texture in can help make it look a little bit more realistic. It doesn't have to be perfect with a lot of this stuff. Okay. Let's see. Sometimes you gotta mess it up a little bit to make it easier. Okay. Just needed like some palette of clean area, and sometimes it's faster to just mess with it that way. Okay. This guy's looking a little weird to me. I don't really know what that is, if it's a statue or what. This thing's a little weird. This is a good candidate. You can see here, like, what's above the area is very similar. There's vertical continuity. There's not much variety going on vertically. So you can very easily copy and paste that texture and not have it feel like you're repeating or making confusing details. Looks like perfect from here. This is trickier, right? Because what's above it is not, it shouldn't necessarily continue. So this is a case where it's small enough that I'm just going to use generative fill. Feeling pretty good about it. This is a little blue and light for some reason. This is also a little bit visually confusing. This lamp is a little bit messed up, but I don't know if it's worth fixing. I could just get rid of the lamps. That's probably what I'll do. To get rid of them, I'll use this same tool. Just trying to figure out the best place to copy from. What I just did here, so when we ran generative fill, I've been hitting this hotkey without realizing it, but on a Mac, Command-Shift-E, presumably on a PC it's Control-Shift-E. I'm flattening these layers. You can use flatten image here if you prefer. That was a bad choice, because going back to what we got generated, we got some trash output. That's okay, but it has like a weird watermark. This is the best. It's definitely not good, but I'm going to try to improve it a little bit with some light stamp work. Copy this guy. See how this continues over? That should be kind of okay to copy. It won't be perfect, but it might be preferable to what we had. a lot of these things, it's up to you how far you want to take it, and if you're not comfortable drawing with like an actual pencil and something like Procreate, it gets pretty artistic pretty quickly. So these tools like generative fill are very helpful. You know, this isn't totally coherent what's going on here. I don't like that these lines are reading like that. I'm gonna copy. There we go. That feels better to me. It like reads more like a shadow at least. If I can get rid of this, yeah. Then it reads well enough that nobody's really going to notice what it is. Okay. And then generative fill on this guy. I do not like running generative fill in the middle of, you know, an important part of the image, but I might run it, see what happens. If it doesn't work, I might try to fix it manually. Here I could probably copy from one of these other pillars if it doesn't work well. Yeah, those are not good results really. Let's try that. So I'll pick some reference point that's similar in both images, like that guy, and then I'll just start drawing. That's looking pretty good to me. Like I could almost just leave it right there. I don't want to go too far. I think that's good enough at a glance. Nobody would ever know, you know, without really closing in on that detail. Go leave that. There is natural blue in the scene, so blue is not a bad thing there. And then we got to get rid of these guys. Let's try it. This area is just tough because I can't really, it's hard to stamp, or it'll take a minute if I try to stamp it. That's pretty good. I'm going to keep that, but clean it up again. Oop. This is a smart layer, so it can't be drawn on. That's why I flattened the layer. There's that hotkey again, Command-Shift-E. Okay, so I'm basically just cloning this down. I think it's really close enough already, but we can try to polish it up just a little more. There's a little repetition, which is often like kind of a flag of editing. I recommend if you see that, if you see yourself creating that, kind of trying to go back and break it up. Eliminate that repetition, or create some variety so it's not quite so literally repeating. That's much harder to distinguish. Okay, I'm going to try this method real quick here. Okay. I'm just trying to do this in somewhat real time so you guys don't have to wait too long, and so that you can see how long it actually takes me, because it's not the fastest thing in the world if you're working with 15 images a day or whatever you're trying to get out in the world. Okay, I just don't want quite so much repetition there. Looking pretty good. It's not perfect, but it will do relative to the overall quality of the image. The sketchier styles lend themselves to this easier editing process where it's okay if there are some mistakes in the editing. Like here I can clean that up by copying vertically. There's some kind of artifacts to clear up, like you can't see them at a glance, but maybe it's still nice to clean up some of this texture. And then we've still got the lamp, Sometimes it feels like it drags on forever. Take that guy. I think I will kind of track these across. All right, that's pretty clean. Check on the people, see if there's anything weird. Sometimes you get somebody like half a body, or here we've got this weird text. You get this less, you get less of these weird artifacts with less sketchy styles. That's a positive. There I used delete and fill selection. That does not use the internet at all. It's just using other textures on the image. It sometimes does work pretty well. There's a little bit of cleanup to do here maybe, but really pretty much fine. I don't want to, it's actually kind of more, this is too white. Okay, so shortly here we'll get into the color portion and the lighting. This image is already pretty good, so I'm not going to have to do a ton, but I generally like my backgrounds to be my base, call it a base tone, this tan, red, yellow, slightly green color in the background here. That is a very important color for me because it kind of sets the continuous color throughout the images a fair bit when I do multiple images. So kind of thinking about what your through lines through multiple images will be is a helpful framing. I'm going to hit Command B. That is the color balance pop-up. It lets you take colors and adjust them individually, color channels. A lot of people like to do color grading, color editing in Lightroom or other tools, but I like having it all in one place. You can start in Lightroom and go to Photoshop from there, but I haven't gotten to that point yet. So the first thing I usually do is mess with the highlights. The highlights are what you're seeing, the light tones, the closer to white tones, whereas the shadows are the closer to black tones. The highlights I want to be less red here and maybe slightly less yellow. So I'm gonna, on the red-blue scale, go toward the red side. And then I'm gonna also get rid of some of the yellow. It's still a bit red to me, but this might make it too cool feeling. I think that's pretty good. You might like it more green. One thing to keep in mind is different screens show colors differently. Looking at an image on your phone, if you're working on your computer, can be helpful to see what you're really going to get. And Android and iPhones, various different types of Android phones, all have different color styles and so do different computers. So I'm going to leave that there. I might mess with other colors in other occasions, but I really like the colors here. I might make these reds more, well, I might make these kind of mid-tones, these darker colors here, a little bit less red and more blue. But I kind of like it how it is. I think that's a good balance. I took out a little bit of red there. That's a little too red. That looks like a nice amount of red to me. Midtones, I'm taking out a little yellow there. I don't want the background to be white. That would make the scene feel very bright. You never actually see white. The sky is typically light blue or light yellow or light orange. Typically you see more color on darker or mid-tone type of things like a tree or a cloud that light is reflecting onto a darker object. So anyway, I'm gonna show you something though that's related to the background being white. If I wanted to, I could click this button here, and you can't see it on the screen, but if you add a curves layer to your background, you can do this with the levels tool as well, I believe, but curves and levels are related to lighting and color. And the curves tool has a built-in, just trying to get, there we go, sample in image to set white point. So you can kind of take a point on the image and it will apply the opposite color scheme to the overall image, making that color white, kind of inverting the color value it has. So if it's red, it'll make it green or blue. So there you see what we get. That's not desirable to me, but it can be useful. One thing it can be useful for is creating a consistent color scheme. So here, from here, I could keep this, I could go to levels and take the white down to a lighter gray. So this is what I do often. If I really can't get the colors right myself, I'll use this curves tool, make the base color white, take the level, the lighting down, the output level down to 240 so that white is actually light gray. And then I'll go back to colors, highlights, and I'll make it yellow and red, which it's much different than it was before. That's what we had before. Maybe the best is somewhere in between. It looks pretty yellow upon looking back at this now. But I think what's going on in the middle here has gotten a little bit too white and bright. So I'm actually going to keep this and maybe just bring it down in lighting a little more and make it a little more red, a little more yellow. And get rid of some of the blue tones in the shadows. It's hard to explain why these color changes, why I'm making these color changes intuitively, but they're typically to offset a color I view as a negative in the image. So I see something I don't like and I kind of try to correct that more than anything else. I think highly skilled color graders probably have a kind of end image in mind already and can work toward that, but I think a good starting point is just trying to notice issues with an image and reduce them. One last thing I'm going to do here is get rid of this little tower on top. It's a little close to the top of the image and I like to have a bit of space to work. I'm also going to fix this issue while I'm seeing it. Things don't all have to be real. They just have to look like they're real things. So like it's not totally clear what's going on here, but at a glance it looks kind of coherent still. The needle. Just want up to there. And this is where it gets a little bit artistic. You're kind of more directly working with the individual pixels. That's pretty believable though. And I like how it's not quite so close to the edge of the screen. I'm going to keep working on the colors here just for a minute. It's often a struggle and it's frustrating when you have an image that you like that is kind of getting ruined by some hue issue. Okay, so I think the colors I'm happy with. The lighting, it could be brighter, but there's a relationship between color and bright, kind of how well you can add exposure or light. So with the background being this kind of non-white color, I can only really make it white by making it gray first, if that makes sense. If I try to make it white before the color tone the hue has been taken out of it, it'll look blown out. It'll look like an area of the image was overexposed. Whereas if you kind of fix the hues, you can get the colors to be a lot brighter or darker without looking weird. Again, it's a little hard to understand that if you haven't done a fair bit of editing probably, but we might see it here. So to me this still looks a little red. It's pretty white at this point. It's still a little red, but it's maybe on the yellow side right now. Yeah, we're not seeing the effect I was hoping to, which would be a bit more space here where I could take out the high end of the spectrum in levels. We might see on our other image. But this is good, it's bright. It's brighter than I was imagining, so I think this image is done here. Now going over here, I'm going to start with color and not mess with cleaning up the artifacts. I will though crop. I hit C here, but you can just use the crop tool there. The one thing I might clean up is more related to the top. That those spires at the top are kind of going to create issues actually for the proportion of the image I want, unless I want to crop off this crowd, which is actually probably the better thing to do. So I'm going to go down here and just because I don't want key parts of the image to be bothering people while they watch. Clean up a couple things. At the top of the image, I'm going to use the marquee tool and I'm going to delete and fill selection. I want to basically expand the sky, and then I want to get rid of these little spires for the most part. I'm going to use delete and fill again, and then I'll come in and kind of do the end with the stamp tool. Pretty clean. Okay, so colors here were very yellow. I'm going to do that curves trick just to show you again kind of what it does. But here we don't really have anywhere that would be white. We just have kind of brighter areas. So this is going to be very bright looking. So clearly not a really usable case of it, but sometimes it works well and it's good to know about for those cases. So here I'm going to go back to colors. The highlights I'm going to make less yellow and a little less red. But I think that's about all I want to change in terms of color. I actually like the yellow here. If I go to levels is more where I tend to mess with brightness. I don't use curves much. This section here allows me to basically, where there's no data, allows me to increase contrast without really losing information, without creating a blown out effect. Whereas here, I'm still going to do it to create a bit more brightness. But if I do this, you can see it starts to look kind of too bright to look at, or something like that. Okay. For me, that's pretty good. I think I cropped it a little too high down here. It might have been better like that. But yeah, that's the basic idea. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll keep doing these. They'll probably be shorter in the future because I won't be explaining the kind of hotkeys and whatnot of the common tools I use. So it'll probably be more like 5-minute videos where I do 5 images quickly or that kind of thing. Alrighty, thanks for watching.